Ah, yes, friends. OGP, the One Giant Podcast, on a Monday, post big game, breaking it down. As we welcome you in, your hosts, me, Adam Armbrecht, he, Andrew Makowitz, and of course, healthy, wealthy, and wise, as we all knew he would be on Valentine's Day, good sir.
Yes. Adam, did you happen to watch any football yesterday, or what? Was there some? I think the Nets had off, right? So that was nice.
There was a there was a good XFL. They started their tryouts. They're just starting to do bring in some of those bodies, guys that haven't played in 5 or 6 years, taking a look at some dudes that were cut back in '97 off some NFL rosters. So I thought it was pretty good. Did you catch one?
You know what? I actually did. I watched the game. You know what? It kind of felt like it was a little meh, right? Like the game was okay, but I don't know. There's been certainly more memorable big games to watch than the one that we saw yesterday.
The game was bad. There's a lot of things. I mean, listen, overall, you want to get to a lot of different stuff. I thought that the Cincinnati Bengals did a great job in that game, right? Because by the end of this one, when you look at the score line, it's a failing on the Rams' part. Like, you should be blowing this team out. Like, and there's a lot of things you could point to. But the first thing I'll just say is the commentary during this game was so bland and so vanilla and so disinterested for 3.5 quarters. And then Chris Collinsworth tried to dial it up and act like that final drive and the touchdown pass to Cooper Kupp, which was a nice pass. He started bloviating over Stafford and Kupp like the greatest tandem in NFL history. It was the weirdest, most imbalanced like presentation around a game like that I've heard in recent memory. Like it was so weird. It was so weird and like awkward and uncomfortably just like I don't know. I know it doesn't matter. Like I know nobody cares about it really, but I was just like, man, like you guys get paid substantial amounts of money to basically sit there and do nothing for 3 hours.
It was weird. It was like it was almost like the touchdown happened and he realized that the Rams were going to win, so he had to get in like these like philosophical greatest duo, like just like in the pantheons of the NFL. Is this the great like it felt
He
really
won
weird.
cliche BS bingo, right? He was
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh,
exactly.
tic-tac-toe. Yeah, it was brutal.
There's a whole host of different things that we need to talk about, but the first thing that I wanted to talk to you about, Adam, and I think all Giant fans will feel pretty good about this, is maybe we'll talk about our man Eli Apple. I mean, I think it's pretty funny getting the temperature of Giants Twitter, maybe New Orleans Twitter as well. But man, Eli Apple got toasted by Cooper Kupp, gave up the big touchdown at the end of the game. He was like terrible yesterday, and all that trash talk that he's had for the last month and a half. It feels like he's kind of he's eating his words a little bit. What do you think?
Well, I mean, listen, I get it. Pre-talking trash, Giants fans and Saints fans, they're already going around with like all the highlight reels of him getting beat, etc. Right? Once you started talking trash, you obviously put yourself in the spotlight to kind of get ridiculed a little bit. Honestly, he gets beat on that final touchdown. Was it really terrible coverage? You know what I mean? He was draped over Cooper Kupp. It's great body control by Kupp, turns himself back across. Like Eli Apple has his hand in there. He got burned on a lot of plays in that game, obviously. So did Jalen Ramsey. Also got his face mask nearly ripped off his head. But like, in the spectrum of the game, it's all relative to me. I think he deserves to get burned a little bit here. I also don't entirely get it. Like, I don't understand why people care. He hasn't played on the team in years. Like, him being bad in a Super Bowl does not change what he did or didn't do for the Giants, which is always ultimately what I come back to. That being said, if it's one of those things that just feels good to get a little chuckle off of, maybe throw a little shade back his way, more power to you, because there were more than one former Giant that was in this game, and one former Giant that certainly did not perform so well in Eli.
Well, Adam, I think the more interesting thing is, yeah, like Giant fans, Saints fans, gonna go after Eli Apple after all the trash he talked about. Fan base is thinking, New Orleans being dirty, terrible city, no food, no culture, like whatever he was saying.
Himself no favors.
Right. He wasn't helping himself out. But what I thought was fascinating was like every single NFL player, especially some of the wide receivers, were on Twitter just absolutely destroying Eli Apple. So it's not just the fans that don't like Eli Apple. It's not that he didn't do any favors with us. Like Michael Thomas of the Saints came out and was like, this dude's trash. Rashad Bateman, Hollywood Brown, like the whole Ravens team was like, Eli Apple, terrible. Like across the board, NFL players came out and were like making fun of Eli Apple. And it was kind of nice to see it's not just fans like having sour grapes. It's literally other players who he considers his peers are just eviscerating him online.
Well, it's yeah. Listen, have some fun on a brighter note here in a second. But that's the other part of it is like that was the hardest part. Eli Apple when he was in New York. There's been plenty of guys that have been on the Giants and struggled, right, and never quite met expectations. But he was simultaneously kind of, talking s at everybody while also struggling on the field. So listen, bottom line is, you may not find yourself playing on an NFL roster come next season, Eli Apple. And it's relationship building. You want to stick around. You can be a subpar player and still manage to hang on to a 53-man roster as long as you stay in the good graces of, which Eli Apple seems not to, the players and teams that you associate with. On the positive side, though, unfortunately in this game, there was an injury. This game felt like the microcosm of Odell Beckham's career, right? And in a very positive way, he got himself a championship. Well deserved. I don't know if all Giants fans can, get past the fact that he was once a Giant and could have been whatever, blah, blah, blah. He had a great start to the game. He was clearly the needle mover for the Rams offense. And we've seen that throughout the playoffs, kind of having these key catches, key sequences. We know how good he can be. And then he suffers the injury too, right? So he goes down and has to watch the rest of it from the sideline. Incredibly emotional at the end of it. Wins the championship, but again, it felt like it encapsulated what his career has looked like. Some really big highs, disappointing injuries and lows, and having to sometimes watch the success from afar. But good for him. I thought great for him. Like, I don't know how you feel or Giants fans feel, but like this is where I couch it the same thing with Eli Apple. He doesn't play for our team anymore, so I don't really look at it through any type of good or bad lens, or I don't have any animosity around it. I think it's awesome. He deserves to, he's an incredibly talented player. I'm glad that he got to win one. It'll be interesting to see what happens with him now going forward with that injury and how it's going to impact his short-term prospects.
Yeah, well, so the Odell thing, I don't know. I think the sentiment from Giant fans is like, yeah, we would much rather have him win than Eli Apple. Like one of them was going to get a ring, and I'd rather it be Odell. Odell left. It felt like Odell left the Giants not because of the Giants or Giant fans. He kind of left because he like he was a diva wide receiver, right? Like that's all the great ones end up being some type of diva. Like they have it in them somehow. And that was just kind of like who Odell is, right?
Odell left because like the team wasn't good. That's
Right.
why the team
Right.
wasn't good. Like, and I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, and the Giants moved on from him because he wasn't good. And it's really hard because underneath Dave Gettleman, you go, well, that guy, sharp tack in the box, right? But like that's why the team was going to be bad. It's really it's whatever we think about Gettleman. It's not good practice to be paying an elite wide receiver enormous money when you're going to be in a rebuild, even if you're telling people you're not in a rebuild and you're keeping a veteran quarterback, but signing old left tackles to overpay them. It's a whole thing there, friends. But that's why you separate. And if you're OBJ, it's, you get lucky here a little bit, right? Because they don't do you any favors, the Giants, when you initially go to Cleveland. You try to build up there, you have injury concerns, et cetera, et cetera. We all know where it ends up, but he manages to get to a spot, and more than just ring chasing per se, it's like he got to play a very crucial role in this. And while Cooper Kupp stepped up late in that game, Odell Beckham Jr. was the guy that was making the plays that mattered over the first two plus quarters there before the injury that were really setting the stage for them. And then everything stagnated until that final drive for LA.
So the thing that I took away from that game around Odell Beckham is like the Rams were a perfect situation for him. You have the offensive player of the year, Cooper Kupp, on one side, who is unbelievable, right? And it feels like Odell's perfect spot is to be like the best number 2 wide receiver in the NFL, right? Like that's his niche. I don't think he like everywhere that he tries to be number 1, it feels like it's almost too much for him. So having Cooper Kupp on the other side made it easier. You saw right away openings, 2 catches, 53 yards, touchdown. Like it felt like if he didn't get hurt, it was going to be the Odell Beckham game. Like you just felt it. And then when he got hurt, you could see the Rams struggled. They're like, I don't know what we're supposed to do. And then around the third quarter, like, oh wait, we have Cooper Kupp. I forgot about him. And then they started feeding him the rock, and he ends up with 2 touchdowns. But yeah, I mean, I'm curious about Odell, and I'll leave you with one more question on him. He's basically going to be a free agent, and now he said he'll take a little bit of a discount to stay with the Rams. but like you said, he's injury prone, but he's electric. Like, what is his market in free agency? Like, is someone going to pay him $20 million a year on a
Nope.
4-year deal?
No, there's not off the, and we don't know what the severity of the injury is just yet. But you're talking about a guy coming off another injury. I don't think so. And if he's comfortable being in LA and he likes it there, then like you've already made your money. They're not going to give you a $5 million a year contract, but you'll split the difference, right? And maybe you'll end up making 12 to 14 with some incentives potentially that could get you up towards that upper echelon of money. But to your point, if it's under, whether or not he fully believes it, if it's understood that you operate best when you're in a system that has another number one to force some difficult matchup issues for the defense, and then you can excel in that, then you have to kind of price yourself accordingly. The bigger curiosity to me would be, what if he's 100% healthy? What if what if he comes back and shows that he's capable of being healthy this offseason? Will there be a little bit more of a robust market for teams that are maybe in win now mode? If Aaron Rodgers goes to Denver, would you like to drop him in there depending on what other wide receivers you have there? Or is OBJ just comfortable? And like we said, you see all the emotions that he was showing at the end of this game. Clearly, it mattered to him. And I think that was important too. Doesn't matter to us, but important to see it, because that shows you how much through all this stuff, the guy does love to play football, does want to, win at the highest level. And he was able to accomplish that. So it'll be interesting to see what his offseason looks like.
I was going to say, Adam,
Sure.
if I had to peg it, I think you hit it pretty correct in terms of what the expectations would be. If he's going to give them a hometown discount, how does 3 years, $40 million sound for Odell Beckham, where he's making about $13 million a year? Like, it feels like he's in LA, he's happy, he's making $10+ million. The Rams get him on a 3-year deal, which is probably the rest of his prime, and everybody's pretty happy, right?
You would think so. Right now, they have some concerns around how they're paying who, what, with, where, when, and why, right? Because they went all in on this season. So important to win that game. One other footnote quickly on the Rams. Like, there was an article that came out that suggested, and then it became a narrative, that this could be McVay's last game. He could be walking away after this to take some time and go collect a check in the booth. This was, and shout out to Locked On Nets co-host Doug Norrie, who he read up on the article. I just saw the snippet out there, and he's like, if you read the article, he was asked, do you see yourself doing this when you're 60, for another 25 years, because McVay is only 36. And he was like, ugh, that's a long time. Probably not. And somehow that became McVay to walk away, go to the booth, and possibly return in a decade, like John Gruden did, his predecessor, out of his tree. So it was like and having just seen it in passing, I was like, man, people can really just pull on those threads and make a story that doesn't exist. So McVay also obviously wins a Super Bowl at just 36 years old. It'll be interesting to see how this team, how do they shift and reformulate this thing, right? You have Von Miller there. It was big for Aaron Donald to win, obviously get his championship. You have Matt Stafford, who looked like he was on the edge of losing a limb all season long, right? But like you checked the first box, you won the championship. Now the question is, do they run it back like this and keep everybody intact? Or to me, you still have Stafford, be a little smart about it. Like, maybe roll some pieces over, right? Maybe sell high on a couple of guys, right? And try to reconstruct yourself maybe with some younger parts, and then you can still be competitive next year, because I still think there's these handful of flaws here on this championship roster that going into next year might get a little bit exposed. Least of which is Jalen Ramsey is one of the most talented and hardest players to root for in the game, in my opinion. Because when he makes the big play, he's in the camera. He wants everybody to know it. And when he doesn't make the play, he's wondering whose fault it was and who didn't do the right thing behind him and whatever. Like, he is quintessential Eli Apple, just with way more talent. So it's a lot easier to kind of like deal with some of the things that he might say on a play-to-play basis.
Yeah, I mean, well, first we'll start with the McVay piece. I think it's funny that you mentioned that because, yeah, they asked him, like, will you be here in 25 years? And he's like, probably not. And they're like, McVay to coach last game in the Super Bowl. You're like, well, how do you get from there to there? I mean, there are different things about how great he would be in television, how he could make more money in TV and have like,
I don't think he'd be so great in television, but go on.
well, I mean but that's what people are saying. They're saying that he would be perfect for TV, can make $10 million a year, and work about 1/10 of the amount of time that he's working now. But yeah, so he's 36 years old. If I had to guess, I'm gonna say over under at least 5 more years with the Rams is kind of like where we're at. So we can just park the whole like, are we gonna retire thing? Yeah, Jalen Ramsey is interesting because he is ultra talented. He's a top 3 cornerback in the league. And also, yeah, he likes to tell you that he is. And then when he gets burned, it's like the hands are up looking around at everybody else like it's
Yeah.
someone else's problem, which again, the cornerbacks and wide receivers are like the biggest divas in the NFL. It's just part of their DNA. Jalen Ramsey's no different.
No, of course not. And so again, like I'm not even really throwing shade. It's just one of those things, right? You'd love to have a guy that talked that much smack and also complained that much in an instance, just because you'd have the incredibly talented player that he is. Let's turn our attention real quick here. We've done in the past, so we're coming to the conclusion of 2 full seasons of the podcast, and normally there are official league dates that start the new league year. But I'm taking my cue from the New York Football Giants over on Twitter, where they said the new season begins now. And they said that right after the championship game ended. So, by the way, sir, we are officially into year 3 of the podcast. Welcome. How does it feel here? Is the air a little bit fresher? Does it taste a little crisper?
Well, it does, and it's also because of a couple things that are going on. Like during Super Bowl week, there's parties in LA. You see all the players getting all their awards. Everyone's hanging out, and you hear things like, Travis Kelce comes out and is like, Mike Kafka is like a football savant. So the Giants got very fortunate with him. You see, Emmanuel Sanders and Josh Allen and everybody else coming out and saying how Daboll is the real guy. So all the coaching staff that we've assembled is just getting high praise from across the league. And you know what, that kind of means something, because it was a meaningless game for Giant fans. We didn't really care who won this game either way. But to hear that we've got the right people in place as we head into this new season, it does feel like positivity. I'm just wondering, Adam, like, will it be in the next couple of weeks? Will it be before the draft or free agency or training camp, where we talk ourselves into the Giants making the playoffs, right? Like
That's either here
that'll
or
come eventually. I'm just wondering how early it'll be.
yeah, I've got my thoughts on that, but I'll keep it to myself. It's just the start of the new season. But you know what? The game did matter, Andy, for you and me a little bit more
Mm.
than just 2 teams playing in the big game out in LA. And that's because of the OGP showdown. And, friends, the story of the tortoise and the hare comes to mind here. Some people start out fast and furious, flashy, spinning their wheels, kicking up dust. Other guys are just slow and steady all the way through. We came into this one tied at 9 points apiece. We were doing 1 point for the Super Wildcard weekend, then to 2, and then to 3, and up the list we went. We entered it at 9 apiece, Andy. And I took those Cincinnati Bengals. I took those big 4 points, and I said, hey, I believe in Joe Burrow. I believe in this team to lose by less than 4 points. And lo and behold, the sweet stench of victory rains down upon me. Overall, because I'm not going to gloat too much, because you had 5 of 6 on opening Super Wildcard weekend. It was a heck of an opening bill for Andy Makowitz. But overall, you went 7 of 13 over the course of the playoffs with your picks. I went 6 of 13. So only one slight better allocation of value as we got deeper into it. But I thought overall, man, 13 to 26 for the show as a whole. Good game picks, heck of a competition. The trophy is in production as we speak. We'll have a whole little brouhaha around that once it gets delivered. And I mean, I knew I was better, right? But this is kind of that affirmation. This is, hey, everybody read the writing on the wall here. It was going to be Adam. We knew it all along.
It's nice that you created the point system for this one too, which is nice. So like, I end up picking more correct, but you end up winning somehow. Like that's really that's a testament to your foresight to be able to think about like, well, he's probably going to pick more games than me, but if I get one right at the end, like that is a victory for me.
Ultimately, though, by the way, you were burned by the LA Rams because you took them against the 49ers, and the Niners covered that spread, and you took them in the big game, and they covered the spread. This was, remember, I had to make a hard choice. I took the Raiders in the points way back on Super Wildcard weekend against these Bengals, and then after that, Bengals every single round all the way through. Had to have conviction.
I listen, spreads matter. That's what I tell all my friends. They're like, oh, I think this team's going to beat this team. And it's like, yeah, but by how much? That's really the question mark. The Rams miss the botch snap extra point at the beginning of the game for the Rams comes back to haunt me. Could have been 4, could have been a tie. Tie goes to the guy who picks more. I'm not saying that, that cost me, but in the end, spreads matter, Adam.
Could have been the Rams missed a extra point.
Yeah.
it could have been that would have been 4. That would
That's
have
what
been
I'm saying. That
yeah.
that extra point early in the game
Yeah.
cost me. But I
Huh.
mean, look, we can always squabble about one play here, one play there.
Yeah.
Kudos. It's a testament to you. You came
Thank
out
you.
on top,
Thank you.
more points in the showdown.
Exactly.
I got to go back to the
That's
lab.
all I wanted. All we wanted from this was you telling me how good I am. That's all. That's all we're looking for, right? We don't need to get into the hairy details of it all. Let's just talk about how good I am. Bottom line is, it was a lot of fun, and we're gonna roll this over into next season and do a lot more of it because we finally figured out this system. So we'll go into next year. We'll try to bring in some other podcasts and get involved with some of the showdowns as well. So that'll be a lot of fun too. Other than that, though, man, listen, what's your let's cap it off with this. How did you feel about this season overall? I was hearing people talk about like, was this the best possible matchup for the Super Bowl? The game was a little lackluster. We all understand that, but were you satisfied with what the playoffs produced overall and the final game that you got?
The Chiefs Bills game was the best playoff game I've ever seen in my life. It literally was. It had everything. It had drama. It had last second scores. It had touchdowns galore. It had two of the best quarterbacks in the league dueling it out. It's like that game. You could have ended the NFL season on that game, and I would have been very happy. It feels like some of these other games were just a little bit of fodder at the end. Like the Rams play the Bengals. Did the two best teams make it into the Super Bowl? Like I don't know. Like,
Right.
would I have rather seen the Bills or the Chiefs rather than the Bengals based on like how that game went? Probably. Because like I don't know. But I think as a Giants fan, the season went about as well as you could have hoped for. And you may say, like, what are you talking about, Andy? If the Giants
We
win,
talked about Andy.
yeah. Well, thanks, Adam.
Yeah.
If the Giants win one or maybe two more games, then we have another Dave Gettleman, Joe Judge season upcoming in the most critical season of evaluating Daniel Jones. Nothing changes. It's the same old, same old. We probably spend $5 million on a backup running back that Dave Gettleman had coffee with in a Starbucks in Carolina in 2006. Like, we would be stuck there in purgatory. It feels like because the Giants bottomed out and things flamed out so terribly, we finally have like a competent brand new vision from a GM and a head coach and some of the brightest minds in the coaching room. Like overall, if we're not going to make the playoffs and make a run to the Super Bowl, I think this is probably the best situation the Giant fans could have imagined for the team looking forward.
Yeah, it's funny because I was thinking back to when we were talking about records and what the season could look like, and we had asked that question, like, what does Joe Judge needs to do here? And I don't know where we were, and this I'm not pitting it you or me, but I feel like it was if you get to 6 wins, 7 wins, that could be okay, whatever. And I remember at the time saying like I want to set it at it needs to be 8 wins because to your point, had the Giants won 6 or 7 games, this could have looked a lot different from how the organization felt and if they would have kept Joe Judge around. And for me, it was like, no, you need to be within one game of being a above 500 team, right? Not this weird thing that we did 2 years ago where, well, it's the wins, but there were 3 games that you could have said could have been theirs. And then if they had, they would have been 9-7 and maybe going to the playoffs, right? Like too much of that happens here. You look at this season now that happened and you go, well, I'll give you 3 more games that you could have won, and you're still a terrible team, right? Like there was no way to get around that, and that, um, sadly, is the biggest positive you can take away. It was so bad that you couldn't even make a mistake thinking it could have been better if things had gone differently, and that was important, by the way, given all the injuries this team suffered and everything else. Where you go, what about all these problems? Like, nope, not good enough. Still shouldn't be that bad, friends, and that's ultimately where they got to. So,
I think the key, yeah, the
Lombardi
key
trophies we're hoisting, losing playing cards.
the key that we realized in the last 5 or 6 years is we kind of thought we knew what rock bottom was. And every time we hit rock bottom, we're like, oh, this is it. Like, this is rock bottom. And they just kept getting progressively worse and worse and worse. But I do think we actually did hit rock bottom. I think if I had to pinpoint it, it had to be the QB sneak on second down and the QB sneak on third down, right? Like that was rock bottom for the organization as a whole. And I think we will look back and be like, oh yeah, like we're the only team in the history of the NFL that has ever run a QB sneak on second and third down of a distance more than 5 yards. Like clearly we were trying to win. That was rock bottom, and we actually hit the floor.
I think that was the visual rock bottom for this team, but I think the rock bottom was when you saw BJ Hill just slicing through the line in this game to get after Matthew Stafford, and you remember that there was a moment when the Giants just actively chose to chuck away a very young, talented player in favor of Danny Shelton, right? Like that to me was the rock bottom when you saw that the organization was still at the hands of people like Dave Gettleman and like Joe Judge that everyone already knew was not going to be a part of this team going forward. And yet you allow them to influence big decisions around important players. That being said, friends, at the end of the day, because we didn't really touch on Matthew Stafford, obviously he wins this game. He helps cement his legacy, Super Bowl. Okay, put him in Canton, right? But I think maybe, Andy, maybe we'll dial up because now that we've wrapped this, let's get back into that price point QB value, right? We got some guys out there on the open market that could be going to new locations this offseason, but I think that that's coming up here. I don't know, maybe as early as tomorrow, but I think we're going to tap into where we rank these guys and whether or not Daniel Jones makes the top 32. We will be back in all week long. Go ahead, Andy. A little, just give people something to ruminate on before we return.
I was the one thing I was going to say is, Matt Stafford wins. He had a mediocre game. He threw 2 picks. He wasn't great, and that's why they literally couldn't give him the MVP. They had to give it to Cooper Kupp because Stafford played pretty mediocre. What I think is going to be fascinating, Adam, and this is something that Giant fans can think about it moving forward. If Aaron Rodgers leaves Green Bay and Tom Brady's retiring, like how many really good quarterbacks are there in the NFC? And does that mean that Daniel Jones, within the first 6 weeks, could vault himself up into top 5 in the NFC discussion points? Like, this is what, as a Giants fan, makes me happy to think about in the offseason.
Well, we'll leave you with that one, friends. Come back in to get all the juicy nuggets from Andy Makowitz about how Daniel Jones is a top 5 quarterback in the upcoming season. We'll be back again tomorrow talking all things New York Football Giants. Follow us on social media, One Giant Podcast. Andy Mack, 214? Is it 214?
Yep.
214 over on Twitter, at Adam Armbrecht over on Twitter as well. And of course, over on YouTube, where the subscriptions are building up there. We're going to continue to pump out the content. We really appreciate the support, looking to surge here over the offseason. So join us over there as well. And as Andy Makowitz for we'll say last time / the first time of the new season wants, needs, and nay, demands the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.